Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to Living the Dream with Curveball, a podcast where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by a globally recognized keynote speaker, author, and talk show host, Steve Klein. Steve has worked with organizations around the world to cultivate relentless attitude and results-driven actions. So we're going to be talking to him about how we got started and everything that he's into. Steve used to do martial arts, and he is also a talk show host. So, Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Curtis, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't you start off by giving everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
Well, you mentioned being relentless, and that's what I talk about, but I didn't start out that way. Quick bio about myself. My first job out of college, I was fired after 6 weeks. I was 600 miles away from home, and at the time I was hired as a news director for a small radio station in Nebraska. And I was fired and made a salesperson, and I had absolutely no idea how to sell. And didn't realize at the time, but I realize now, looking back, that I had to be relentless in what I had to do. And then looking back in my life, I've had a lot of problems, failures, setbacks I had to overcome. And being relentless became a part of my life. So as a result, I began to help other people develop that skill so they wouldn't quit and they could achieve a lot more and have more success.
Well, how did you yourself become relentless, and how did you get into helping others become relentless?
Well, the first part of that question, how did I become? I really didn't know I was becoming relentless because I realized that I wanted certain things very badly, and I had to make things happen. When I was learning how to sell, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I began reading books on selling, reading books on success to understand what it took to become successful, and did the things necessary. No matter how many times I fell down, I kept standing up. And that's what relentless is all about. I now help other people do that too, because a big part of the problems that we have in our country is that people quit and give up too soon. And I help people realize that no matter what you want to achieve, you're going to have failure, you're going to have problems, you're going to have setbacks, and that's what makes you stronger. We can't start out knowing everything at one time. We have to go through setbacks to help us understand exactly how we need to be successful and what we need to do to change. And that's where I go now, and I work with people one-on-one. I also do a lot of speaking, and I do a lot of coaching.
Well, you work with organizations across the world. Kind of tell us about that and some of the organizations that you work with, and saw a lot of testimonials on your website and kind of the good things that they say about you and how you help their organizations.
Well, I work with a number of organizations, many associations, mostly large companies. And if anybody wants to take a look at those, that's on my website, which is steveaklein.com. I have been working with them because they find that they want someone coming in and giving that motivational, inspirational talk to their people to help them realize that they can do it. We're coming through, hopefully, the end of a pandemic that hit us a little over a year ago. And that was a problem. That was a setback that none of us really had any control over. And many, many things have come out of that have been very positive in terms of new ideas that have happened, new businesses that have started. But these were started because businesses wanted to become successful. And in many cases, they had no choice. And that's a big part of that too. When you realize that when you're going to jump across this chasm, you better make it because you have no choice. And that's a big part of what being relentless is all about. When I talk to people about being relentless, there's 5 key areas that I talk about. The first one is to lock your sights. To achieve what you want to achieve, you have to lock your sights on what you want to have. And when you do that, you begin to attract to yourself mentally the ideas, the methods, the tools, the steps you need to take to make those things happen. Number two is to stop thinking. And what that really means is quit worrying. Focus on what you want to have, because ideas will begin to come to you when you do what you need to do and don't worry about anything else. Step number three is what I call own it, then own it. You have to actually own what you want to achieve in your mind before you get it. It's almost as if you have it already, and then your mind helps you do the things necessary to make those things happen. Number four is the one I like the most, which is eat nails for breakfast. You gotta do the hard stuff. You gotta do the stuff that most people won't do. If you take a look at any successful person out there, they have done things that other people don't do. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest problems in our country is that people quit and give up too soon. When there's a Chinese proverb that says the temptation to quit will be greatest just before we're about to succeed. And we never know when that's going to happen, so we have to continue going. And then the fifth pillar that I call the 5 steps is to bounce back. No matter what happens, we have to keep bouncing back. Another Chinese proverb says that if you fall down, stand up 8 times. And the more you stand up, the more you keep going, the more you become successful. You asked me about some of the associations and companies I work with. I work with a number of kids organizations. One of them is called AVID, A-V-I-D. I work with them in the school systems to help underprivileged kids get into college. It's a 6-year program beginning in 7th grade, working all the way through high school, where kids are taught how to learn, not give up, focus on the school they want to go to. And in many cases, these kids get full ride scholarships into college. So that's a thrill I have in seeing young kids learn how to become relentless.
How has your teaching or coaching on being relentless changed with the pandemic, and how have you and your clients kind of shifted it around, if any?
Well, they did make a major shift once I talked to them. They had to change because this was thrust on us, and it was a big change. And change is a thing that people don't like. People like things the same way. Now, they may say they don't like change. They may say they like doing things differently, but we're an habitual culture. We like by habit doing the same things the same way all the time. And something like a pandemic throws a wrench in the works, and all of a sudden we're either working from home, our business is closing down, restaurants couldn't operate, and all of a sudden you have to look for new ways to be successful. Now, during the pandemic, did many people fail and quit and stop and give up? Yes, they did. But the ones that persevered, the ones that stayed with it, are the ones that made that happen. But again, a big part of being relentless is focusing on where you want to be and doing the actions necessary to get there. And what happens with that, our mind begins to give us ideas to make things happen. We attract to ourselves that which we think about. Now, I know that a lot of listeners may know people that are always negative. Well, they keep attracting those negative things to us. But we can attract anything to us. Matter of fact, a couple of examples I tell people is that it's interesting that once we buy a new car, all of a sudden we start seeing the exact same car all over the place. Now, it wasn't because everybody went out and bought the same car at the same time we did. They were always there. We just didn't pay attention to them. And that's really the point. Everything is out there in abundance. Most people don't pay attention to what's in front of them. And so what being relentless is all about is beginning to pay attention to those things that help us get to where we want to be. Another example I use is when women get pregnant, all of a sudden their husbands or the woman that's pregnant begins to notice more pregnant women. All of a sudden everybody around them is pregnant. It's in the water. No, they just never noticed pregnant women. Again, everything is out there in abundance. It's a world of abundance. The problem is sometimes we have to take 2 or 3 steps backwards to be able to realize where we have to go and what we have to achieve.
So tell us, you're also an author. Tell us about the books that you've written and what they contain if somebody purchases them and reads them.
Well, the one book that I have published, and I'm working on a number of others, one of them I'm working on is Being Relentless, but the book that I've had published so far, which is available on Amazon, is called Sell When You See the Whites of Their Eyes. That book came out of my experience in learning how to sell after I was fired from my first job out of college. Again, as I mentioned, I had no idea how to sell. I had to learn on my own, and I read books and studied everything I could get my hands on when it came to sales. The job I had, 2 jobs after I was fired, I was working with a company. I became the top salesperson 7 years in a row in the United States out of 500 people. And 2 years, I was number 1 out of 5,000 worldwide. I began to help people develop those steps they had to take to become a successful salesperson. And that's why I put the book together. It covers really 2 areas. Number 1, it covers the actions you need to have, the activity you need to have to be successful. The other part of it is developing relationships. And that's why I called Sell When You See the Whites of Their Eyes. If you can't see a person's eyes, if you can't look them in the eye, you don't have the chance to develop a relationship. So this book is all about helping people develop the right kind of sales activity, making more calls, seeing more people, and also developing the relentless skills necessary to be successful. The second book I'm writing is on those 5 steps I mentioned on being relentless. I'm also working on some books on some major sports, baseball, hockey, basketball, and football. Those will be in the works in the next couple of years.
So I have an interesting question for you. I bet you might have never been asked this before. I happen to be totally blind, and I know you just was talking about if you can see the whites of their eyes, you could make sales. What advice would you have for somebody who is totally blind and cannot look into somebody's eyes or per se see the whites of their eyes to become a good seller like you were talking about in your book?
Well, you were right. No one has asked me that question before. The title actually came from the general, I believe it was, in when he was attacking the Indians in South Dakota. Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. You have to get close enough to them. And that's really what it's all about. It's not necessary to actually see a person's the whites of their eyes. It's a matter of getting close to them and developing a relationship. The fact that you can't see the person that you're talking to doesn't mean you can't develop a relationship with them. When it comes to business or succeeding in any way, relationships are extremely important. And the relationships come from working with people. And my philosophy is you need to give before you get. Do things for other people. You don't have to be sighted to be able to do things for others. Anybody can do that. What you are going through, the fact that you can't see, is a setback that you have to overcome. And we begin to compensate in other ways to be able to see the whites of their eyes. And I'm sure over the years, you've developed relationships with many people. A big part of that is listening very carefully and being able to ask the right kind of questions. When that happens, relationships are developed.
Yep, I have, especially with podcasting and also being in radio as well. Speaking of talk shows, tell us about your talk show.
Well, the talk show I have is called Playmakers Talk Show. And I picked that name because the people I work with are playmakers. They're making things happen. I also live in Dallas, Texas, and a former Cowboy was also the playmaker for the Dallas Cowboys. So I thought that was a fitting title. I've interviewed over 500 CEOs, multimillionaires, and celebrity entrepreneurs over the last 7 or 8 years. And it's interesting, no matter the gender, age, or business of the people that I've interviewed, There's some common patterns, common mindsets, common approaches of highly successful people. And as I interview these people on my talk show, I find out in many different ways what it takes to become successful. There is no one way to become successful other than not quitting. And the people I talk to are primarily leaders. And in addition to understanding how they became successful, I'm also understanding how a leader needs to lead their people more effectively. So this has all led to being relentless and helping me understand what it takes to succeed, and then going out and teaching people how to do those things too.
Well, I'm glad you like the Dallas Cowboys because that's my favorite team as well.
Great.
What upcoming projects besides your books are you working on that people need to know about and be aware of?
The projects I primarily work on are finding different associations of companies that I can go into and teach the relentless skills, and also going into schools too and working with the kids. I had a minor setback during the pandemic since most of the kids were at home rather than in school. Now I'm able to get in the schools again, and I like being in front of the kids. I like being in their classroom. I like being working with them. And what's interesting when I'm working with these kids is they are some of the best audiences I have. I primarily work with adults, but these kids that I work with that are in this AVID program really want to learn. These are some of the most motivated kids I've ever worked with in my life. Many of them are coming from blue collar families. They're coming from one parent families. They are not necessarily in poverty, but they don't have a lot of money, and they want to get a great education and go to college. And I've never been around such a positive group of people before when I've worked with these kids. So I primarily work with them. I work with companies as I do my talks. I also work with companies on developing their leadership skills for their key people. Another thing that isn't taught to most of us is how to become a leader. Now, there's management courses out there, but being a manager isn't necessarily being a leader. So about, I'd say a third of my time is going out and working with companies to help upper management, middle management, and supervisors become more effective as they're leading their people.
During the pandemic, did you work with the kids through Zoom, or did you just put your course on hold with the kids until you got a chance to get back into the schools?
I put it on hold. Part of the problem with that was the administrators that I was working with to put that together weren't having meetings for the kids for the AVID program, and they were just doing their regular classes. So now that that's kicking up again or starting up again, I'm starting to get back into the classroom and work with these kids. And hopefully they're going to be excited to have me come back again, because even though they were at home, they lost the ability to be social with a lot of people because they couldn't get back together with them. And I'm looking forward to getting back with them, helping them do that more effectively, and continue moving them to get into college.
You want to give out your contact information? I know you gave out your website earlier, but give out any social media links and any way people can stay in touch with you, and if a company is out there that wants to contact you for your services.
Well, the best way to do that, as I mentioned before, was my website, which is Steve A. Klein. That's Klein, steveaklein.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Don't have my address specifically in front of me. But if you type in Steve A. Klein in the little box in the upper left-hand corner of LinkedIn, you'll find me. I'm also pretty active on Twitter also. That'll be also tied in with my LinkedIn page. Should anybody have an interest in actually phoning, my phone number is 972-644-1048. I'm in the Dallas area and would welcome any calls. Can contact me on my website, or my email address is steve@steveaklein.com.
Do you have any final thoughts before we close it out on being relentless, or just anything that we might not have covered that you would like to talk about?
Oh, absolutely. Whatever you're doing, for those who are listening, no matter what you want, don't quit. Don't stop. Don't give up. The first thing in becoming relentless is to figure out what it is you want to do that is much more than you're doing right now. Now, it could take 6 months, a year, 10 years to get what you want to have, but it's the journey on becoming successful that's more important than actually getting the success that you want to have. And something else along with that, once you begin to work on something that you want to achieve, you are successful. And that's what success is all about, working toward it. It's a thrill of achieving. A couple of people I've had on my talk show have started numerous businesses, and they have a thrill of starting the new business and exploring new territory they haven't explored before. So again, coming back, the last thing that I can say to people is figure out what you want, figure out what steps you have to take to make those things happen, get as much information from people around you, research as you can, and work on your goal. There's nobody that says you can't have something. Now, there might be more difficulties for some kind of people than others, but work toward what you want to have because you can achieve it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Klein. Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Curtis, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and thank you very much also for the questions you asked. This was wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure as well. Listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, and review after listening. And Android users, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.